So, Hall Pass, new movie by the Farrellys, first Farrelly film, I think, since Heartbreak Kid, which you've probably seen posters for everywhere around. So the story is Owen Wilson and Jason Sudeikis are these two husbands who are effectively overgrown adolescents whose wives agree to give them an inverted commas hall pass, which is a phrase which doesn't mean anything in the UK at all, but under the circumstances of the drama means that their wives say, look, you have to get out of your system the fact that you're adolescent, the fact that you spend your entire life ogling other women, so we are going to give you a hall pass from your marriage. You have a week to go off and do whatever you want to do, and it doesn't count. It's like, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens during the hall pass, the thing, it just stays there. The idea, therefore, being that the husbands will go off, will misbehave themselves, will be adolescent, but will discover in the process of doing it that in fact they rather like their married lives. Here's a clip.
I don't know how I feel about it.
Feel about what?
The hall pass. Something doesn't seem quite right.
Well, you think like Maggie might have a brain tumor or something?
No, it's like just because your wife says it's okay to cheat, is it? I mean, there's a part of me that's like, wow, you must have really pushed her to get her to this point. And is that good for a marriage? That she's willing to try something this insane?
Absolutely. Come on. Doesn't it ever bother you that all of our wives' dreams come true and ours don't? Look at Maggie, all right? When she was a little girl, she used to play house. You bought her a house. Look at you. You're not living your dreams. I don't see you hosting Wheel of Fortune. Your wife is living her dreams. And now this woman, this saint of a woman, she's giving you the opportunity to live yours.
Now, I went into this feeling, because having just arrived in New Orleans, I went into it feeling like, Elvis in King Creole, and I came out of it feeling like Elvis in Tickle Me, which is not good.
I don't get that.
I
haven't seen Tickle Me.
No, well, nobody saw Tickle Me. Actually, no, funny enough, that's not true. Tickle Me did take money. As with all the Elvis movies, they did all take money, although they were all wretched. One of the interesting things about the Graceland tour was that even at Graceland, they accept that 90% of the stuff that Elvis made in the movies wasn't any good at all, except for the 4 that he made before he went into the army. But then after that, he came out, and Colonel Tom Parker got him shut into these contracts. Anyway, but that's a whole other story. The thing with the Farrellys is, I actually like the Farrellys. I think that they have made some really interesting films, and the time that their films work the best is when they balance gross-out humour with something that actually has sentimentality and some form of substance. If you think about something about Mary, for example, you have the infamous hair gel scene, but then you also have Jonathan Richman sitting in a tree singing love songs, which is really sweet. If you think about a movie like Stuck on You, which there was some controversy about, on the one hand, it appears to be a comedy about a subject that you can't make jokes about, but on the other hand, actually they are much more open-minded and even-handed about the subject of disability than an awful lot of Hollywood movies would be. The problem with this is that when they started out their career, they made a real virtue of the fact that their humour was dumb, that it featured really infantile, scatological, gross-out humour in a way that hadn't been done before. And obviously, since that happened, we've had this whole slew of American teen, frat boy, jock movies which have just pushed that envelope as far as it can go. And the problem here is the characters aren't interesting, the characters aren't likable, the jokes aren't funny, the situation isn't believable, the setup doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and you just spend the whole thing waiting for the film to get into gear, and since it doesn't, you just spend 90 minutes in the company of people you don't like, don't believe in, and wonder why on earth you're having to spend 90 minutes in their company, with one notable exception, which is that there's a moment in it when there's a sort of explosive diarrhea moment in the bath, so you think, okay, fine, they've done the scatological bit. There are other bits which attempt to come towards something which is reverse marital psychology. Of course, the idea is that as soon as the guys are let off the leash, they realise what they're missing, so consequently they don't run around like because they've grown up and they're now different people, all of which doesn't work in the way it's set up. But in the middle of it all is this cameo from Stephen Merchant, who is there playing cards with them at the beginning and has a couple of lines which are quite funny. And then you don't see very much of him for the rest of the drama. And then the film plays out, and the film plays out exactly as you'd expect, and then the film ends. And then, after the credits, or in the middle of the end credits, there's a weird little 2-minute section in which Stephen Merchant gets to do his own little thing. And I promise you this is true. I'd sat there in the cinema and people weren't laughing very much. It was a late night screening, 10:30, so it was basically, kind of teenagers and upwards. And there was about maybe 15 other people in the cinema, and it wasn't going down. And the primary sound that you could hear was the sound of popcorn being eaten. Because, of course, here, if you order like medium popcorn, it's where can I park my trailer? I mean, people were coming with buckets of popcorn they could basically not see over. As we were all leaving the cinema, in the middle of the credits thing, suddenly this thing happens with Stephen Merchant. And then there's this 2-minute skit with Stephen Merchant, and I promise you, there was a guy coming out of the cinema behind me who was standing up, turned round, watched this 2-minute skit, and at the end of it was literally on his knees, crying with laughter. And it was the strangest thing, because I thought the end bit of it wasn't that funny, but it had reduced him to tears, largely because the rest of the movie was so laugh-free, so uninteresting, so failing to hit even the sort of the fairly low target that it was aiming for, that this bit at the end, suddenly, when you had somebody doing proper jokes, doing them quite funny, doing them quite deadpan, made everybody laugh. So it was a really weird thing. The movie didn't work. I like the Farrellys, but it's one of their worst films. I mean, I don't like Kingpin at all, and I'd say it's up there with Kingpin in the failure stakes. But the last bit at the end somehow made the fact that it was bad all the worse, because you suddenly realise what you should have been seeing for the rest of the movie. Because honestly, this guy at as we were coming at the thing, he was literally on his knees, and he got up and he said, I'm crying with laughter. Why wasn't the rest of it like that? And exactly. Why wasn't the rest of it like the bit that they stuck in the post-credit sequence? Because that's what good comedy looks like, and they could manage to sustain it with the right person for about 90 seconds. It's a real shame. I like the Farrellys, but they dropped the ball big time here.